Please welcome Bill Gates and the Bill Gates Dancers.
He started out as a shy, computer-obsessed teenager and ended up the richest man in the world.
Lifestyles of the rich and famous. No, that's never been Bill Gates. You get this sense that the money is almost an annoyance to him.
William Henry Gates III, most people just call him Bill Gates, has built an empire by thinking way outside the box.
I have no doubt that 100 years from now, he will be talked about in the same way that Rockefeller and Carnegie and Ford are talked about, as people who transformed an era.
Now, after leading the digital revolution and facing several government antitrust battles, Bill Gates is a different man than he was just a few years ago. He's a devoted father and an avid golfer who just happens to have a portfolio worth $50 billion. He could rest on his laurels, but that's not the Bill Gates style.
What makes Gates so competitive is that he finds it fun. He finds this like a thrilling game, like the games he used to play as a kid.
He's loved and respected, hated and reviled. But one thing neither detractors nor supporters can deny is the lasting impact Bill Gates has had on our time. The values that shaped Bill Gates as one of the business titans of the 20th century go back to his roots in the Great Northwest. Bill's great-grandfather, J.W. Maxwell, founded the first national bank in Seattle. The Maxwells enjoyed their privileges and social position, but were never ostentatious about their wealth. Their son, Willard, also a banker, and his wife, Adele, who had a passion for playing cards, were among Seattle's top civic leaders. Their only child, Mary, was a lively, intelligent girl who made a name for herself as a student leader at the University of Washington. Athletic and outgoing, Mary Maxwell was sometimes referred to as Giggles. Her drive and energy struck everyone who came in contact with her.
There tends to be a handful that is right at the core of the action. Mary was at the core of the action. Mary was unaffected, straightforward, charming, but immensely determined.
It was at the university that Mary Maxwell met and fell in love with a quiet, scholarly young man, Bill Gates Jr., who would go on to become one of Seattle's most prominent attorneys. When Bill and Mary wed in 1951, she decided to give up a career as a teacher to raise a family and devote time to charitable work. The first of the Gates' 3 children, Christy, was born in 1953. She was followed by a brother, Bill Gates III, born on October 28, 1955. He was given the nickname Trey.
That derives from the fact that he was William H. Gates III, and the card players in the family think of anything with a 3 as being a Trey, so he became Trey.
His mother had an extremely close relationship with Bill from the start. She even took him with her when she volunteered as a lecturer in Seattle schools. It wasn't long before her precocious son would read the World Book Encyclopedia from A to Z.
We'd lose him sometime for hours at a time, and when I would ask, "What are you doing?" he'd say, "I'm thinking, Mother."
The Gates family prized competition, and young Bill loved testing his mettle in outdoor activities and indoor games. Among his favorite board games were Risk, in which the object is world domination, and the perennially popular Monopoly, where, with a bit of luck, anyone can become a tycoon.
He was competitive in cards with his sister, races to see who could do jigsaw puzzles faster, ski racing, sailing, whatever. He wanted to do it well and as good as the other folks that he was with.
Every summer, the Gates went off to their place on the Hood Canal called Cheerio. It was here that Bill, his younger sister Libby, and the rest of the family joined friends in staging their own Olympic Games.
If you stayed overnight and had a couple of days with them, you would come away exhausted from games and activity. It was a very lively scene. It was definitely competitive, there's no question about it, and the children were all part of that. There was never a dull moment.
The first World's Fair in the United States in 22 years.
When the Seattle World's Fair opened in 1962, the Gates family rushed to see the wonders predicted for the 21st century, including computer technology.
Imagine, if you can, an electronic brain.
Bill often returned to visit the high-tech exhibits. It was already clear that he had a natural talent for math and science. But he was also becoming something of a loner, showing signs of preteen rebelliousness that was putting him at odds with his mother.
Mary and I grew up in very orderly families where parents were controlling personalities, and we carried that forward. And that particular mode wasn't exactly consistent with Bill or Trey, who somewhere around about 11 or 12 began to be very independent emotionally. He was quite willing to make up his own mind about what he wanted to do and not do, and that was really tough for us, particularly for Mary.
He was kind of lost. I mean, he was ill at ease in school, wasn't sure exactly how he wanted to spend his time. Obviously a very smart, brilliant kid, but kind of lacking direction. And he went through some counseling at that time. He went through a change in his school.
Although they believed in public education, Bill's parents felt he would find more direction and discipline at Lakeside, Seattle's best private prep school. He began to blossom at Lakeside.
He was an excellent math student. He was excellent across the board. I mean, he was a superb drama student and interested in reading all different kinds of books and so forth. So he wasn't just totally math science oriented. He had a wide breadth of interests.
When Bill started high school in 1969, the U.S. space program was at its peak. Apollo 11 took men to the moon that July.
The Eagle has landed.
But the computers that made it possible were still electronic giants that cost millions of dollars and required an army of people to run. Most schools at that time could never consider buying a big computer. But Lakeside had made an extraordinary deal that would be fateful for Bill Gates. A Seattle company offered the use of its computer through a teletype link to the school. Young Gates was entranced by the possibilities of this primitive machine and started spending every free moment in the computer room.
The story has often been told, and it's completely true, that he would get up at night and leave and go over to work on the computer and come back, and we wouldn't know that he'd been gone.
Bill Gates shared this addiction with upperclassman Paul Allen, who could not have been more different from Gates. He was not only 2 years older, but substantially larger. Where Allen was quiet and contemplative by nature, Bill could be shrill and confrontational. Nevertheless, this odd couple was destined to make history together. While attending Seattle's prestigious Lakeside Prep School, Bill Gates met Paul Allen, an upperclassman who shared his obsession with computers.
They bonded by writing software code together, and somewhat competitive, Paul Allen and Bill Gates. They every now and then would have fights. At one point, Paul Allen kicked Bill Gates, who was a little bit younger, off of the little group they had as writing software, but then he realized that he needed Gates back. He couldn't do it without him, and Gates said, well, I'm happy to come back, but this time I'm going to be in charge.
By 1970, when Bill was just 15, he and Paul Allen went into business together. The two boys netted $20,000 with Trafo Data, a computerized program they created to measure traffic flow in the Seattle area. Although Bill had the luxury of family money, he was determined from the start to make his own fortune.
The father of one of Bill's boyhood friends said Bill always had a nose for the dollar. Even as a kid, he knew the value of a contract, and even had a contract to use his older sister's baseball mitt that was signed in a legal document.
In the summer of 1972, at the age of 17, Bill went to Washington, D.C. to work as a Senate page. This exposure to politics and government would come in handy later on. Back home that fall, he took a leave of absence from school when he and Paul Allen got their first real jobs with a computer company. They began talking about starting their own company, but the Gates insisted that their son finish high school and attend college.
His mother used to worry that he was socially awkward. Well, maybe he was, but he had other things on his mind, and he was not rude, he was not abrupt. He was marching to a different drummer. He's a genius, and he has a different agenda.
Bill graduated from Lakeside in 1973, and his parents took great pride in his acceptance at Harvard University. So he left Seattle and headed east to Cambridge, Massachusetts. As a freshman at Harvard, he thought briefly about preparing for a career in law, but no course of